Good morning, everyone. Welcome to News Center Maine's Political Brew. Glad you could be with us. We're joined today by former state Senator Phil Harriman and attorney and longtime talk radio host Ken Altshuler. Gentlemen, good to have you together with us.
Yes, likewise.
Nice to be here.
Plenty going on to talk about. Let's get right to it. The full legislature met for the first time this year and had to burn some midnight oil to pass a compromise on the supplemental budget. It includes tax relief for businesses that got Paycheck Protection Program funds from the feds and tax breaks for people who received unemployment benefits because of the pandemic. Governor Mills applauded their work at hammering out a compromise. The Republican Party says it's going to push for more tax relief in the coming months as they work on the budget for the next 2 years. Phil, it seems the budget really is the best place to flex that minority muscle, isn't it?
Yeah, when you have to have a 2/3 vote of both the House and the Senate, the Republicans actually are an influence, and they made it very clear in the negotiations they weren't going to support the necessary 2/3 vote unless, as you've just reported, on these tax relief. But it was interesting to read in the local newspaper on Friday morning, Pat, that the governor was criticizing the Republicans for not being more of more compromising. So, as you just said, it's going to be interesting to see how the new 2-year budget unfolds, with Republicans presumably going to use their influence to influence the budget, and the governor is already making it clear she's not happy.
And Ken, you have to wonder what the stalemate was over, because those tax relief programs were already generally agreed on, right?
Yeah, I was surprised. 3 days and midnight oil and 1:30 in the morning. I mean, I'm glad that they finally reached a compromise. I think it was bipartisan. I think that's good. I think that the Republicans targeting tax relief is actually fairly smart. I think that's an issue that sells well and plays well to the public. I think it's more effective than saying we don't want to spend money on the infrastructure or on internet connections. So I think it's a smart strategy. I think it was well done. And I think it does show some collaboration in Augusta.
Now, as we look ahead to the next biennial budget, the American Rescue Plan, that COVID relief bailout that the president signed a couple days ago, Maine will get about $1 billion in state aid, plus $647 million for local governments. And that far exceeds Maine's 3-year budget shortfall projections. That money can't be used to fund tax breaks or pension obligations. But Ken, who should decide how that money is going to be used? Republican lawmakers want to require a 2/3 vote in the legislature on any plan by the governor to spend federal aid.
Yeah, you can't change things just because you're not in power. And as I thought, if Paula Page was in power, they would not be making this proposal of a 2/3 majority. I think that the way we're doing it is fine. I think that maybe having a committee set up to discuss how to apportion this money, where to apply it, would not be a bad idea. It would also show collaboration. I don't have any problem with the current system. I think Jenna Mills is doing a great job with her decision making. The legislature can certainly make proposals, but no, I don't think you change the rules in midstream because it suits you as a minority party.
Phil?
Yeah, they don't have the votes to get their way. They don't need a 2/3 vote in this case, so they're just going to have to grin and bear it as the Democrats decide what to do with this money, which, by the way, is way over the top. It's being sold as COVID relief dollars for America, when it's actually much more than that and way over the top in the borrowing. And the governor is going to be able to easily balance the budget and expand other programs if that's their agenda, and we're all going to pay for it in the years to come.
Ken, is there a temptation to do that?
Well, let's not forget Donald Trump passed a $2.2 trillion package as well.
Well, that's my point. There's already $1 trillion in the pipeline, Ken, that hasn't even been spent yet, and we just added $2 trillion more.
But what he was targeting was his business interest and big business and wealthy people. What this one does is go trickle down to middle class and lower class. Good for Joe Biden and good for the Democrats.
And it bails out a lot of blue states that were in deep financial trouble because they have not balanced their budgets properly.
As opposed to red states that were the only states that Donald Trump paid any attention to.
Well, also back to Augusta, the Republicans tried and failed to rescind Governor Mills' emergency powers. Senator Rick Bennett, a Republican, got several Senate Democrats to go along with his proposal. Phil, should lawmakers have more say on how we're managing the pandemic?
Yes, I think they should, and it's another example of the party with the most votes rules. They are in charge, and between the governor's office and Democratic leaders, the word went out to their caucuses: do not give the Republicans enough votes to pull this executive authority away from the governor. Elections have consequences, and this is a good example.
I agree. To the victor goes the spoils, and this is why we're here. I think Janet Mills has done a great job. I'm sure Phil may disagree with that. I hope that the emergency powers can end soon. I really do think we see the light at the end of the tunnel. I don't think it's a long-term process at this point, and I think that they were smart to keep it the way it is and not ruffle the feathers of any of the Democrats right now.
We had a special election in the legislature this past week. Democrat Craig Hickman, a former state rep, won the open Senate seat easily. What does this tell us, Ken?
Well, it shows that the Democrats are still pretty popular. That is a swing district. They did vote for Donald Trump in 2016, although they did carry Joe Biden in 2020, as well as Susan Collins. So I think it shows that the Democrats are well entrenched. I think that Shannon Bellows leaving that position, I think the Democrats did a good job in making sure a Democrat replaced her. And I just think status quo is working right now.
I see it a little differently. The spending in that race, Democrats outspent 2-1. As Ken accurately points out, that district is pretty evenly divided by party affiliation. But I think at the most important part of this whole conversation is that the Democrats were able to mobilize people to go and vote. And basically about, I would guess, 25% of the eligible voters actually showed up and voted in that election for a state Senate seat that will remain in Democrat hands.
Grassroots efforts do work. And I will say that Democrats have traditionally, while the Republicans were focused on ranked choice voting, Democrats are good at finding people running for the seats and getting the votes out. And I think Phil's right. If you do the work, you get the elected officials.
Gentlemen, we talked about the filibuster with Maine's U.S. senators this week. Senator Angus King says he's reluctant to go along with eliminating the filibuster, but he adds if Mitch McConnell and his caucus are going to be no to everything and everybody's going to be on board, then we've got to get things done for the country. Meanwhile, Senator Collins, a Republican, tells us that the filibuster protects the rights of the minority party and produces better legislation, and says Democrats will regret it eventually if they eliminate it. Ken, should dropping the filibuster rule be an option as Democrats try to implement the Biden agenda?
Well, they won't pass it if they try and get rid of it. But, the filibuster is not the filibuster, as you saw in Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, where somebody stands up and dominates the Senate floor until everybody gets so bored they finally drop the legislation. Right now, because you can filibuster, you have to have 60 votes to pass something, and you don't even have to filibuster. I think that's silly. I think get rid of it, or make it the way it was intended to be. Dominate the floor if you can, and then you can stall legislation. I'm a majority rules kind of person. I think 51% should pass legislation. Republicans got rid of that for judicial federal appointments and for Supreme Court appointments. So I don't think we need a filibuster anymore. I disagree with Susan Collins on this.
Phil?
There's a distinction here, Pat. This isn't a regulation. It's not a law. It's not in the Constitution. These are rules that the Senate has created for them to govern how they're going to do their business. And when the Democrats controlled previously, they got rid of the 60-vote rule on judicial appointments, and I would argue they probably regret that. And I agree with Susan Collins that getting rid of the filibuster is going to enable the majority to tyrannize the minority, and they're going to rule the day when they're back in power, when the Republicans are back in power, and they don't have that filibuster opportunity.
This week, the U.S. House passed a couple of expanded gun sales background check bills. One would expand the current background check to cover nearly all firearm sales and transfers. The other would close the so-called Charleston loophole, which enables some firearms to be transferred by gun dealers before the required background checks have been completed. Shelley Pingree voted yes on these, not surprisingly. Jared Golden said no to both. So, Phil, your reaction to that, and is there any chance of passage in the Senate?
Yeah, I congratulate Jared Golden. Mainers have a proud record of responsible gun ownership. I think per capita we possess the most firearms, and we have the least incidents of gun violence. I support his decision, and I think this is not likely to pass in the Senate, but it will certainly get a lot of airtime.
Ken?
It's not going to pass because they need 60 votes because of the filibuster rule. I'm disappointed in Jared Golden. I supported him in him voting against the $1.9 trillion bailout package. I think there was reason for that. But this vote is catering to the second district. Now, you can argue that he represents them and he should vote what they want instead of what he wants. There's no reason to not have expanded background checks. This is not eroding the Second Amendment. And no matter what we do in Maine, that didn't happen in Charleston. So you know what? This is a federal legislation. He should have supported it.
There are efforts at the state and federal level to block transgender athletes from competing in girls' and women's sports. The sponsor of the state bill says she can't cite any incidents involving a transgender athlete in Maine having a problem, and LGBTQ advocates say there's no need for the bill. But Senator Collins surprised a lot of people when she voted for a failed amendment last weekend to the COVID relief bill, which would have withheld some federal funding for schools that allowed transgender students to play on girls' and women's sports teams. Now, Ken, Susan Collins has generally been a strong supporter of LGBTQ rights, but she says there are issues of unfair competition in other states and athletes losing out on scholarships. What do you make of this?
I'm very disappointed in her decision. It's uneducated, frankly. It's not science. There's 0.46% of the American population that identifies as a transgender. That's less than 0.5%. None in Maine, maybe less than a handful of any situation in which a transgender boy to girl, and by the way, these surgeries usually happen well into the 20s, 30s, or 40s, not the teen years. It's not an issue. It's a solution without a problem. I'm disappointed. It was uneducated of her to do that.
Phil, what do you think?
This is one of these times when you're going to call me a politician, because I can see both sides of this. And I don't think the law or the regulation has been in effect long enough to see if there are any implications to people who are of the female athletic persuasion versus a transgender. We will probably see it at some point in the future. I just think we have to keep an open mind. Both sides truly do have a valid point.
Governor Mills marks 1 year since imposing the civil emergency at the start of the pandemic. She told News Center Maine's Don Carrigan that if she did what the governor of Texas has done by saying the emergency is over, that would be a lie because it is still ongoing. So, Phil, overall, how do you grade the governor's performance over the past 12 months and ongoing?
You know, I have to acknowledge that the governor has done the best that she can do with the facts that she had at the time. Early on, of course, we all remember we were scared into our homes and not sure it was even safe to go outside. To today, we have a lot of statistical information to guide us, and I think she's using that information to serve us in a way that we can have reasonable expectations that we're not going to have a resurgence of the infection rate. But frankly, the notion that we were all in this together is not accurate. And it's time for us to make sure that everybody is treated the same way going forward.
And Ken?
I give her an A. I think she did an exemplary job. She was overly cautious, but I think you err on the side of caution. And because of that, we are one of the safest states in the country, light at the end of the tunnel. By July 1st, I think Joe Biden is absolutely correct. Maine will be back to normal. Whether that happens in Texas and South Carolina and North Carolina, doesn't matter to me because I'm in Maine. So I think she's done a great job, good job. And I think that Phil's right. We have to keep being vigilant. Let's not get reckless. Let's get to the end game here.
And let's have our winners and losers in politics this week. Ken, we'll start with you.
My winner is Joe Manchin, the senator from West Virginia. He's kind of, to me, was the Susan Collins of Democrats. He showed that he wields a lot of power in making the entire Senate kind of kowtow to what changes he wanted. So good job, good power play. And it shows that it's not going to be that easy for Democrats to steamroll the Senate. My loser is Susan Collins. As I said, I was very disappointed in her position with the transgender law. That's an uneducated decision on her part. She usually goes with the science. I'm surprised and disappointed that she did that.
And Phil?
My loser this week is the Biden administration. This COVID relief package is anything but. We have spent far more money than we needed to target the COVID relief, and I think we're going to see the effects of that when the bills start rolling in to repay this debt. My winner of the week is the Mills administration. I think they should get great pride in the number of vaccinations that they have actually deployed around the state of Maine. They've done a great job, and they're my winners.
All right, Phil Harriman, Ken Altshuler, thanks so much for being with us. As always, we thank you for joining us. News Center Maine is back up.